Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today is day 5 of the 30-day film challenge and I'm going to be talking about 7 Psychopaths because the prompt for today was name a film where a character has a job that you want. And of course, if you've seen 7 Psychopaths, of course you know screenwriter is a job. And I was trying to think of some movie about filmmaking because in some way I do want to work on film in some way or another. I could have done like a reviewer, so I could have done Ratatouille or something like that, but that's a food critic, it's not really a film critic. But I chose this movie because I remember watching it several years ago, and I remember not really liking it. But of course, if you want to be a writer, especially after I've gone through some film school and after I've really evolved in terms of my knowledge of film in general, and I think this movie has gotten to a point where I appreciate it so much, and I loved this movie watching, especially the first half. The first half of this movie is incredible. The first time I start getting some issues in this movie is towards the end of the movie, towards the last hour. I think it's run into some problems, but for the most part, this is a really tight and entertaining and really cleverly written and funny movie. But what I think impressed me most about this movie is it's definitely a writer's movie, and what I mean by that is it knows the writer's process, and it really makes fun of that, and it's really it's a view on originality in writing and in film in general, and how nothing can really be original. And really, storytelling in general is never original, because any story that we tell as people in general, and no matter who you are, you're taking experiences from your own life and you're putting it in your writing. And whether that's stories that you hear from other people and you just unknowingly put it into your own stories, and just by this weird way your mind works, you're kind of ripping somebody off and you don't realize that's happened to me a couple of times, and I caught myself before doing it. But sometimes you just don't catch yourself and you end up doing something unoriginal, or you end up taking somebody's story and you're twisting it and making it your own, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't remember if it's Steve Jobs who said this or somebody else, but he said that good artists copy, but great artists steal. And it's that idea that I think this movie has, that kind of talks about the writing process and how this character has just the title for 7 Psychopaths. And his first psychopath is Sam Rockwell's character, because he gets in the news and Sam Rockwell is killing people in order to give him his first psychopath. And his second psychopath is a story that he heard from Sam Rockwell's character as well about Christopher Walken's character. And so all these different ideas that he has for each psychopath is somehow taken from either his own experiences or from experiences from other people around him. Just by being around him, he kind of took all these ideas and he made it his own, or he just straight up stole them. It just depends on which story it is. If it's the case of Christopher Walken's character, he straight up stole it. Or the newspaper ad that Sam Rockwell put in to get people's real life stories, and that one guy who is a serial killer who is an incredible character and it has a really cool story, especially with the joke at the end is really funny. But none of his stories are really original until the Vietnamese character, and this guy who never gets a name, which is also another funny part, which for me, when it comes to writing, character names are the hardest thing ever, because you just don't want to name him John Smith or something lame and silly like that. You've seen a lot of movies where characters just have really bland names, and you kind of want the character's name to mean something, but not to be too on the nose, and that's really all writing. You don't want it to be too on the nose, which I think this movie can kind of think itself is too great. It kind of is a little self-absorbed in some parts, and the movie does smartly undercut itself at several points. That just works really well when the film seems to be getting on its pedestal and praising itself at times, like when they're in the car and they're talking about, oh, the first half of the movie is going to be this way, and the end of the movie is just going to be a bunch of talking, and that's how it's going to be. They're just going to drive to the desert, and they're just going to talk, and that's going to be the end of the movie. And it gets undercut by Sam Rockwell saying, where's the shootout? What the movie has to have a shootout in some way. It can't just end with talking and all that. And so the movie undercuts itself in several points, and that's just one example. It doesn't throughout the entire movie. But at times, I do think this movie can kind of put itself on a pedestal a little bit, and I don't want to use the word pretentious, but at times it feels like it's getting that way, but the writers know to kind of undercut that and kind of make fun of itself, because this movie is really tongue-in-cheek. But what makes this movie so good is all the characters. I love each and every single one of them. Obviously, I connect most with Colin Farrell's character, obviously, because, wanting to be a writer or learning how to write, I am in no way a writer as of right now, no way at all. I'm still very early on in that, so kind of learning stuff from this movie and how this character is portrayed, and how, the cliches with him being a drunk and all that's really fun, and I love this character, and I really connected with him. And Sam Rockwell's character being probably one of my favorite performances from him ever. When he's telling the story of how he wants the movie to end, it's perfect. I love it so much. It's really funny. And Christopher Walken steals every scene that he's in. He is incredible. He's exactly like you would think Christopher Walken would be in any movie ever. Just his voice, the way he talks, and some of the lines that he reads is just perfect. But his story with his wife and the backstory, I think, is the best backstory of any of the characters of the story of the Quaker. And it's a beautifully told story at the beginning of the movie, and as you find out more about him, when the story was true and that ended up being that character, and then you get Woody Harrelson's character, who just really wants to get his dog back, and that's just such a silly like story premise of this mafia guy who's going through all this trouble, letting all his men die around him, and himself getting caught in the end, all for his little dog. And it's really funny. I think my main issues with this movie is when the movie kind of puts itself on a pedestal, but I've already mentioned that. But also, there's one point where it's talking about how the movie treats women and how the writer character is portraying women in his screenplay, and this movie does that exact same thing with the female characters. And it's just like, if you're going to comment on it, maybe have a good female character in the movie and not just purposely keep them out of the movie to make a point. I don't know. It just felt, I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way. That part of the movie I don't really like. And there's one part that's just really confusing. It's when it's nighttime and they're telling, Sam Rockwell's telling how he wants this story to end, and it cuts to day. Christopher Walken and Colin Farrell are out and they're getting supplies from the little market, and they see the newspaper, and then it cuts back to nighttime and they're back around the campfire. And it's such a quick thing. It goes back and forth really fast. And you're like, okay, where are we? When are we? We just got from night to day to night, all back again. It feels like it felt like something was cut. It felt really quick, and it just felt like things were missing. And that happens a lot towards the last half of this movie. I think the last half of the movie kind of loses steam a little bit, but it still maintains interesting, and it's still very entertaining. And the ending of the movie is perfect. I love how this movie ended. It's very smart. All the characters who end up dying in the end is very impactful. All the characters who end up living is very impactful as well. Everything that happens has a meaning, and it's very well written. And like I said, this movie's very clever. A lot of things that are towards the beginning of the movie that don't really seem like they're going to mean anything always come back. There's no thread left, there's no thread left untied, or at least if it is left untied, it's being purposefully kind of ambiguous. Like whether or not Sam Rockwell's character survived in the end, I'm actually not sure. I'm pretty sure he died. But part of me thinks that he might have survived because there's a picture frame with him at the end. But I don't know. I wasn't paying attention close enough. He probably died, but that's just probably me. Comment below what you guys thought of 7 Psychopaths if you guys have seen it. Definitely go check it out if you have not, even though I just spoiled the crap out of it. There's still a lot of things in this movie that I just can't do justice because the writing is so clever and so well done. This movie is just, it's really well put together. So that concludes day 5 of the 30-day film challenge. So tomorrow is going to be your favorite animated movie. So think of it. I know mine. It's actually right there, Toy Story 3. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, comment below, and I hope to see you all in my next one.